My name's Callie, I'm the Okayest Engineer, and I'm at a point where I need to start curing some carbon fiber parts. But normal ovens are too small, industrial ovens are too expensive, and honestly, building a fire hazard in my basement sounded like a good idea. This monstrosity behind me is a fully handmade 110 volt, fully insulated, 8-foot long, modular composite curing oven. I definitely cut a few corners, but it is the epitome of what Okayest is. Now let me walk you through why I built it, how it works, and whether or not this thing lights on fire when I hit the switch. As most of you know, I'm building this helicopter in my basement because, God forbid, I make life easier on myself. And most of those parts that I'm making, I'm going to be doing out of carbon fiber. That process just so happens to require that I post-cure those parts up to 350 degrees. This cowling mold is over 7 feet long, 5 feet tall, and I need to precisely control the temperature ramps and hold times to get a proper cure. Oh yeah, and bonus points if I can get the oven hot enough to do some powder coating for projects I have in mind later. So now let's talk about some of the constraints that I have to deal with. First and foremost, safety. I cannot turn my house into a chimney. That would be a disaster. I have a family I need to think about, so that means no exposed wood anywhere inside the oven. I need to use fire-resistant insulation. Probably seal up the seams, have plenty of circulation internally so I don't get any hot spots, etc. We're not going to light this thing on fire. The second is budget, clearly. This is a DIY project. As with any DIY project, it has to be as cheap as possible. I'm taking this to the next level without being dumb. Don't do that. But the goal here is not to do things perfect. It's just to do them as cheap as possible and with whatever supplies I can get local or on Amazon. The next one is a big one, 110 power supply. I have no 220 anywhere in my basement or in the entire house for that matter, and so I am limited to 110. So to get past this hurdle, I am going to use 2 independent 110 circuits that are connected to their own independent breakers, and I'm going to put this thing on 2 loads. That way I can hopefully get enough power that 210 would provide, but with a 110 budget. I need this thing to be very precise in controlling the temperature. I have to do a very slow ramp rate to the order of like 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit per minute. And so to do that, I need a PID controller so that I can pre-program it and it will follow that sequence and I won't spoil my part. I think it goes without saying, but it needs to fit a huge mold. I think the biggest thing I'm ever going to produce is this cowling. So that is basically 8 feet long, 2.5 feet wide, 5 feet tall, so it has to hold that part. And then finally, because I don't want to leave this oven assembled all the time, I'd like for it to be modular and somewhat lightweight. So we're going to shoot for lightweight materials, and I'm going to try and come up with a design that basically I can take all apart and leave flat. All right, and that brings us to the materials that we're going to be using for this project. This is the more interesting side. This is how we're going to heat and control everything. And at the heart of everything is the brains, the PID controller. This is an SYL2352P. Now, this is not the cheapest version of this. There's a cheaper one for about 30 bucks, and it's just a set it and forget it, similar to what you find on like your oven in your kitchen. This will control those ramp rates that I've mentioned and which are so important for this project. This was about 100 bucks, and I don't know, the reviews seem to be pretty good about it. That gets hooked up to a K-type thermocouple. That's just going to read the temperature inside the oven. This PID controller will control these 2 relays. Those relays are once again plugged into our 2 different AC circuits in our house. So that's the reason for both of those. And then finally, we have a heating element. Now I should have 2. I forgot to hit 2 on Amazon. So that's why you only see 1 here. But these are repurposed out of a bathroom ceiling fan that has an incorporated heater. It's perfect. 110 heating element should do just fine. 2 should hopefully be fine enough, or okayest, I should say. And then finally, we have a repurposed furnace exhaust fan. So this I found just on Amazon again as a replacement part. It was about 80 bucks, and this serves as our convection fan. This runs off of 110. It will run continuously, stay on for forever, and then our heating elements will go right in front of it, which basically makes a glorified, really big hairdryer. And for the oven structure, we went ahead and went with steel studs. Definitely a hit on the budget requirement, but a huge check for safety. For the entire exterior of the oven, I'm just going to be using 1/8 inch tempered hardboard. This is wood. Yes, the temperature is not good past, I don't know, 200 degrees or so, but after 3.5 inches of insulation, there is no way that this should be getting hot. And if it does, we have other issues. And for the insulation, we went with an R15 fire-resistant mineral wool. This was the highest R value I could find that would still fit in a 3.5 inch stud. So I'm hoping that this is going to be enough insulation to keep those temperatures high. And for the entire interior of the oven, I'm going to be using metal flashing. This is for a couple reasons. It adds a reflective surface to the inside of the oven, which should hopefully promote more heat to stay in. 2, it's relatively lightweight. There are cheaper options, but I was gonna pay a penalty on weight. Once again, going back to that lightweight and modularity requirement that I'm going after. This side of my basement has become a catch-all for parts, tools, and materials. It's time to get organized. Enter the FlexiMounts GL1 lift storage system. Thank you, FlexiMounts, for giving me the motivation and tools to clean up this basement, and for sponsoring today's video. With materials lifted clear of the floor, I recover valuable workspace and maintain immediate access to my routinely used parts. Everything stays organized and out of the way. At the heart of the unit is a worm screw drive with a 25:1 gear ratio and optimized pressure angle. That combination prevents back driving, so you can safely lift and hold up to 300 pounds without any drift. Torque is transferred through a D-shaft to 2 independent steel cables. This dual cable design provides redundancy. If one cable ever fails, the other still supports the load. All of this rides on ball bearing carriers to ensure smooth, low friction operation even under full load. Installation took under 10 minutes. Install the 2 mounting brackets and 2 pulleys with the provided hardware, slide in the lift mechanism, and route the cables. That's it. FlexiMounts brand month is here. Don't miss the May 25th Memorial Day brand day sale. You get up to 50% off plus an extra savings of up to $100. Shop now before it's gone, and use the link in the description for an additional 5% off. Well, it occurred to me that these end 2x4s at the end of each one of the walls would actually be better for assembly if these were turned around so that the channel is accessible from the outside so I can send bolts through. It'll probably make more sense a little bit later, but right now I have to go back and change all of those end caps back around. Before I permanently installed anything into the electronics box, I wanted to create all of the wiring harnesses and give this thing a test run to see if it functioned the way I'd hoped. All right, moment of truth. Holy crap, that's a lot of air. The response time of the thermocouple seemed to be pretty good, and this definitely passed the Okayest calibration. And just for a real quick, simple overview of the entire wiring for this control system. So we have our main power input. This powers almost everything. That goes into our PID controller. It also supplies power for our first relay, and it also provides direct power for the fan. So when you plug it in, these 3 components power on. The relay, when it needs power to go to the first coil, will set this relay off with its 12-volt logic. That relay will power the first coil. The second input power comes in, and all this is doing is providing power for the second relay and the second coil, which I don't actually have here, but will be a secondary coil here. That, in a gist, is how simple it is. It will run completely off of just one power input, and then if I need to or want to, I can plug in the second one and have it function just that second coil, and everything should be just fine. I installed the fan in a way that the parts that are allowed to get hot can get hot. This is going to be internal to the oven, and the parts that need to stay cool can stay cool. So this will be to the outside. I've gone ahead and I boxed it in. We'll leave this part completely cut out. This will be the outside of the oven and will hopefully allow for some circulation to happen and keep that motor as cool as possible. So first impressions after I got it all done, or at least assembled, is, I mean, it's not the best in the world. It's definitely okayest, but that is 100% what we were going for. It's totally modular. It's held together by a handful of screws. It's plenty sturdy, but once I'm done, and you can kind of see how big this thing is in the garage, and the wife has already complained, I can definitely take it back apart and store it somewhere else. It is not 100% sealed. You can see the air gap basically on all the corners. I anticipated that. I think what I'll end up doing is coming back with some aluminum tape and at least tape up all the edges. There are a handful of thermal bridges, and that's where you have metal that can go out to the outside. So we will get some heat loss. The corners are inherently the worst, and that's where most of it will come from. So this is my hacked together dual heating element setup. It's got its two independent power sources. I use some just aluminum tape to put them together with an extra screw on each end. That'll get installed right into the front end of the blower, and I don't know, we'll see if it works. Well, I think we're ready to give this thing a go. I also temporarily mounted my thermocouple just with some aluminum tape stuck from the ceiling. This is just a test. I want to see basically how hot it's going to get in the current state. I don't have any tape anywhere. I haven't done anything to try and eliminate the heat loss. I just want to see what this thing will do, just to get a baseline, and then depending on how hot it gets and how far I need it to go, then I'll start adding more things. And the last thing we need to do before we can test this thing is to mount the control box and get everything tidied up. And one last really important safety note before I actually go jump into this. I am not using grounded plugs. This is a metal box. If I have anything that exposes the wires to the metal box, this all becomes live and becomes a really big hazard. I am only going to be plugging these into GFIs. So if something does happen, this isn't smart, but that should be okay. Otherwise, this will always be either supervised. The doors to the garage will get locked. The kids aren't going to come in here. No one's going to touch this thing while it's running. And the only way I'm going to touch it is if I unplug it. So just be really safe. There's better ways to do this. And you guys can rip me up in the comments if you want, but I'm only going to be using this thing like twice. So I'm assuming the risk. Well, it's been about a half hour. It got up to 160 degrees and it's starting to come down. I think what had happened, there's some temperature fuses on those coils that I'm using. And I thought it was going to get a little bit higher than that, but I'm pretty sure those things went. Yeah, definitely blew that fuse. And that one's still going. So basically I had one functional, and that's why we saw the power drop. Time to fix that problem. Basically just bypass the problem you have. So we're gonna get this thing back apart. We'll bypass that temperature fuse. We'll make this thing go past, definitely past its design criteria. and we'll give this thing another shot. I'm not proud, but there's now solid core wire bridging that old fuse, so we shouldn't have this problem anymore. Worst case scenario, it gets hot, which it's supposed to do anyways. So we're gonna send it. And just because I introduced one questionably sketchy thing to the inside, I did do you guys a favor, and I have grounded this whole thing now. I do have a ground plug, and so we are somewhat safe. So rest assured, you can remove those comments if you've already made them, and we'll try not to. For this test run, I initially set the temperature to 300 degrees. It climbed pretty steadily, and after about 33 minutes, we made it to 200 degrees Fahrenheit. I then decided that was good enough for now and wanted to see how good it could maintain that temperature, so I set it to a hold position and let it sit at 200 degrees for about 15 minutes. All in all, worked out pretty great. Now with the basic testing and troubleshooting out of the way, I'm gonna now spend a little bit more time to see if I can make this thing a little bit more efficient. That means I'm gonna get inside and put a whole bunch of aluminum tape on all the corners to hopefully seal up any air gaps that I have. I also noticed that I was losing a pretty decent amount of heat at the interface between my door and the chamber. So I'm gonna throw in some more fiberglass insulation around the entire perimeter of the door, hopefully make a little bit better of a seal and eliminate some of the heat loss there as well. Well, we are sitting right at 300 degrees. This thing, as far as I can tell, is completely heat soaked. You actually can't feel any change in temperature on any of the fiberboard sides, tops, front, or back, so there's no real heat coming out there. You do get, or can feel some it's pretty hot, maybe, I don't know, a little over 100 degrees on the metal on those thermal bridges, basically anywhere that metal is exposed. The worst of the entire spot is this end. That fan is blowing all that hot air directly at this door, and so that's where you feel some of the heat. Even then, you don't feel any on the board again, but you can feel the temperature coming through the screws, which are directly into metal. So that's kind of our worst area down here. But overall, I mean, pretty stoked. It's not dangerous. You aren't gonna worry about burning yourself. It is 300 degrees inside, so we're doing pretty good. If you're looking to build something similar to this and have similar requirements, I've linked everything I've used down in the description, so you can use that as a template basically to build your own. I wouldn't suggest you follow everything that I did to a T, but this should get you at least in a good direction. Well guys, I think we successfully built the okayest curing oven ever. All in all, we didn't set the house on fire, which was priority number one. Two, we built an oven that hit 300 degrees on 110 power, which honestly I didn't even think was possible. Stoked to be able to do that. Not quite the 350, but that was a stretch goal anyways. It's also modular and relatively lightweight. I can break this thing down and shove it up above the garage door for storage and get it out of the way. I think I did okay, or at least okayest. So as always, guys, go build something cool, never stop learning, and we'll see you on the next one.